G'day and welcome to Rise Up with Rick, but also a bit of a special Runners Vibes session. It's a privilege to have jumping on. She's a very busy lady, jumping on from Queensland, Libby Munro, who's a nutritionist expert in the field of Hashimoto's predominantly and gut health, and she's doing some amazing stuff. Helped literally tens of thousands of people already in her journey. Former actor, which I want to get into in a minute. Hat maker, I just found out off air, I went with the Melbourne Cup theme, which is a bit probably too bogan. I think she's got a lot more class than that. Some of her work, but actor on stage, The Great Gatsby, lots of All Saints, and lots of different shows in Australian television and abroad. But I welcome to the show Libby Munro.
Thanks so much for having me, Rick.
Well, I thank you. I know you're a bit off today. I'm so grateful for you coming on amongst your many varying clients. But I will start with where you're at right now because your work from a holistic point of view and the way you work with different individuals and horses for courses and really guide them throughout their whole psychological and physiological journey, in my opinion, is just brilliant. And I know how many people you've already helped. So I'd love you to tell the listeners and the viewers where you're at right now in life and I guess why you do what you do. And I know we're going to come back on and probably reverse over a lot of the science and psychology and physiology of it all, but I'd love to know what you're doing right now.
So, I'm a nutrition coach by trade, which was training and study I was doing in America while working as an actor. I was making movies in the States, and I had a nutrition coach with a fantastic, big American company called Black Iron Nutrition. And I got a coach there when I was training for an adventure sort of thriller. And I had to be running uphill and down dale, and I had to wrestle a deer to death with my bare hands and rock climb and do all of these sorts of things. And I wanted to be in the best shape I could be for this film. And I got a nutrition coach, and she was so incredible. And she had Hashimoto's, which is the autoimmune disease that I have, the autoimmune disease that affects your thyroid, most commonly in women, but about 10% of Hashimoto's cases are in men. And it affects your metabolism, your immune system, and everything. It makes it quite hard to lose weight in particular. So it was really important that I had this coach with Hashimoto's who understood my body. And she was just incredible in helping me with my training, with what I was eating. And I managed to lose body fat, like have a body recomposition phase, the most effective I've ever had. And at that stage, I was sort of like, this is amazing. I wish that more people had access to people with that sort of knowledge of how the body really works rather than this eat less, move more sort of mentality. So I actually applied for an internship with that company and started studying. And that's when COVID happened. And I got the internship with the company, finished my study, and they gave me a job right in the middle of 2020. And I really just doubled down. I went, I love this. I loved my clients. I loved working with people with Hashimoto's. And so I worked actually in the fat loss sort of space, CrossFit, body recomposition, um, refeed days and bulking and cutting and things like that for a few years. But I found that I was really enjoying my clients with Hashimoto's who didn't understand the disease, and I understood it very, very deeply. I didn't realize how valuable that information was, to be honest. I thought that I just knew a hell of a lot about Hashimoto's because I had it. I was diagnosed in 2007. When I was at drama school, I went to NIDA, which is the National Institute of Dramatic Art. Very, very impressive, apparently.
It is
And
very impressive. I meant to say that in the intro. I had that in my brain, and it must have slipped me. I was wanting to
well,
really double down on NIDA.
the only reason I say it is that the level of stress that I was under at that school, I just don't know, other than maybe the National Institute of Sport, where you go to experience that level of pressure on your body and your brain, where we were, working often 60 to 80 hours a week, where we had contact hours. So you had to be in class moving, and there's only 23 people in my year. There was only 9 women in my year. So the competitiveness is so intense, and you are working 9 till 6 contact hours, and then you're rehearsing nights and weekends and performing. So it was just incredibly intense, and I moved interstate to go there. So you're away from your family and friends, and I was cold for the first time in my life, moving from Queensland to Sydney. I was perpetually cold, and I didn't have the clothes or the money to be warm. And I was running every day, and I was under eating to try to be thin, and I got very, very sick there. That's when the Hashimoto's came on in full force, and I was only 24, 25 when I
I'll
got
just
really
I'll
sick.
just pause you quickly there, so that we'll talk a lot about the physiology of it. But you're in this very stressful environment, and it's an as elite as you can find, NIDA. But you're doing what you think, I can imagine you were always going to do. The dream. It was obviously and the competitiveness of it all, and all this kind of stuff. So how did you flow? Was it chicken or the egg? Did you think, and how sick, and how did it present itself?
Yeah, that's a good question. Chicken or the egg? I think that my body, my genetics, I was probably destined to have Hashimoto's, and it was, well, what trigger and when is it going to come on? Because Hashimoto's is generally genetic. There is not one gene that points to it. There is a collection of genes, the methylation genes, that indicate you're more likely to get an autoimmune disease of some sort. And in my family, that seems to be Hashimoto's. I have about 4 cousins with it.
Okay.
My mum's hypothyroid. It's very present in my family. So, but I still didn't know about it at that age, and medical practitioners unfortunately don't help you really to find that key. So I think that my gluten intolerance in particular probably showed up at boarding school. I went to boarding school in Toowoomba in Queensland, and the largest all girls boarding school in the Southern Hemisphere, 250 plus boarders, means that the food is absolutely terrible. So you are eating cereal for breakfast, sandwiches for lunch, pasta for dinner. So the gluten overload is just massive. And for someone who, their gluten intolerance, celiac wasn't a thing even when I was a kid. You don't have
Mm.
to be celiac to be gluten intolerant. I'm not celiac, but with Hashimoto's, with these methylation genes, it just means that you don't process it very well. You don't tolerate it very well. So I think that I was probably quite sick at school. I used to get bronchitis every year on top of the mountain in the mist, and just that burden on your immune system, and probably being at boarding school, not getting enough sleep and things like that, it was quite challenging. I'd say that's when the first sort of signs of things started coming up. But then moving to Sydney, being cold all the time, getting sick, putting my body under a lot of stress constantly, chronically. And I was the worst kind of person to myself, which is really funny now being a nutritionist and coaching people to be healthy. And I am phenomenally healthy. Like, I am a total pain in the ass. I am gluten and dairy free, and I really don't eat very much sugar, and I don't drink very much, and I train consistently. And everybody goes, "Oh, how are you so disciplined?" And I think it's hilarious because I look back at myself going to university and going to NIDA, and I used to eat tinned peaches for dinner and canned soup. I used to eat Campbell's Country Ladle soup. That's what I lived on, pea and ham soup. And I used to just drive myself into the ground running, and I never used to sleep. I used to wake myself up with really loud music first thing in the morning to get my brain going, like 7 a.m. I'd put on Block Party or The Streets, and I'd get myself absolutely psyched and in the zone and run, and then go to NIDA all day, not eat. So I was dreadful. I absolutely nailed myself, and I fell in a heap.
So as a
So
high performer, I don't think you're Robinson Crusoe there. For like you're a high performer, one of the best in the nation. You're young. That was the way it was.
yeah,
It was go hard or go home, and you
it
weren't to
really
know
was.
anything about you. You were obviously doing yourself a disservice. But yeah, it's amazing how that part of your life, like, probably exacerbated or at the very least accelerated the
Yes.
condition. Tell us about just how sick you became.
So the first thing I noticed, obviously, was the weight gain because it was uh it's not that it's so uncontrolled. It's not occurring in the right sequence where I'm eating less and less and less and I'm still gaining weight. And it starts to mess with your head where you start running more, eating less, and it gets worse, particularly around my belly. Just mostly around my belly, but everywhere in general. My face got very round. I had dreadful insomnia, so hypothyroidism and Hashimoto starts to affect your brain and your nervous system and your sleep. So you wake up that 2 till 4 a.m. Period, or not being able to get to sleep. It's called tired but wired, is the general description of what it is. You're exhausted, but you're still running at an 11. My hair started falling out. I started getting really bad skin conditions. I'd get hives quite a lot, big welts on my face, itchy eyes, sort of a dermatitis on my eyelids, which a lot of people don't relate these skin conditions to Hashimoto's, but they are classic signs. Lots of gut health issues, constipation mostly, which is all indicative of hypothyroidism. And underactive thyroid slows down your metabolism, slows down motility, the movement of food through your intestines. Getting sick all the time, so poor immunity, all of it, the whole gamut. And of course, then I'm being scrutinized at the same time, wearing very little on stage, and so self-conscious of my body, and teachers sort of going, what's wrong with you? Oh, brain fog. Wow, that's the worst. Just not being able to think clearly, express yourself clearly, remember very well. And I've always prided myself on my recall, my memory. I'm very, very good at learning lines and being able to learn things on the spot and recreate them. So that was really problematic. But I just didn't know for over a year, year and a half, what was going on. So then I had a lot of tests done because I knew something wasn't right. But I couldn't afford, the specialists and the doctors and things like that either. So I was having to reach out to my parents and go, I need help. Found out I was hypothyroid first. So then they put me on a thyroid medication, and I sort of thought things would get better. But this is something that people don't seem to know or understand, and why I'm online educating a lot, is that thyroid medication does not solve the underlying autoimmune disease. All it does is replace the thyroid hormone that is not being produced enough because of this autoimmune disease underneath it. So the autoimmune disease is your immune system, which is your whole body. 75% of your immune cells are in your gut. They actually go a bit haywire, where your immune system is supposed to attack viral load or help you with bacteria, or it's supposed to manage your immunity. Instead, it gets mixed messages and attacks healthy tissue in your body instead. So your immune system goes crazy, and one of the things it does is attack your thyroid, stopping it from producing enough hormone. So I'm replacing the thyroid hormone, hoping to get better. But meanwhile, my immune system is going wild and attacking everything: my nervous system, my brain, my liver, all of your organs and your healthy tissue. Your joints get sore and painful. So I kept getting sicker. I wasn't getting better. And I was doing more tests, and I found out that I had pre-diabetes and insulin resistance as well. So I went in, and they do this glucose test where they do a baseline glucose test, and then you drink a bottle of glucose. And the glucose made me so sick, I fell asleep in the clinic. So then they do another test, and it's off the charts. There's just glucose in my bloodstream because my insulin is not working. So that's kind of interesting. Well, why am I insulin resistant? I go to an endocrinologist, and these endocrinologists, who are $450 or something for about 20 minutes, are supposed to know all of these things, right? They're specialists in your hormone production. So I'm pre-diabetic with hypothyroidism. I go in to see this guy who was the best in Sydney. This is where all of my my sentiment, I guess, about doctors and things gets really, which I know a lot of people have a similar experience to me, but it's just incredible. I'm so young and so terrified, and I don't know what's going on with me. And he was rude and abrupt. And he's like, there's nothing wrong with you. Take that. And he gave me metformin, the pre-diabetes drug. And he said, that'll help. And I'm like, what about this weight gain? He's like, you'll lose weight on that. And I said, what do I do about my diet? Why am I insulin resistant? Like, why am I pre-diabetic? Because that was scary. I thought, what am I doing wrong? I'm running all the time. I eat like a boiled egg a day sometimes. And I'm like, what's wrong with me? And he's like, no, you don't need to change anything. Don't change your diet. Just take this and you'll be fine. So, of course, I
Just
took...
reeks of laziness and, well, no, it just reeks of
It's just,
ignorance and laziness.
no knowledge about
Ignorance.
the cause of pre-diabetes and insulin resistance. If I had talked to him about eating tinned peaches at night, or not eating at all, then maybe we would have gotten to the bottom of why. So this is where my brain is constantly a why. And I kept asking and kept digging at that age, where I went, I'm 25 years old. Why am I hypothyroid? Why am I insulin resistant? Why am I so tired all the time? Why am I gaining weight? I wanted to know why. And nobody would answer me. So I kept going bananas about this. I was reading every book and trying different doctors and trying to figure out why. So on the break between my second and third year, I started getting very curious, because I was going into third year at NIDA, which is the most high pressure year, where you get your agents and you have, you start getting seen by casting directors and things like that. And I was overweight and with dermatitis on my face and my hair's falling out. Like, I was a disaster. So I wanted to figure out what was going on. And I went and saw a holistic doctor up on the Sunshine Coast when I was on holidays with my family. And she is the first one, because she was pretty worried about me, and she tested my cortisol. And this is where we get to talking about stress hormones. My cortisol was 3 times that of a normal human being, off the charts high. So they actually ended up doing a CT scan on my pituitary gland, because they were worried I had a pituitary tumor. It was that bad. No tumor, just stress. So now we know what's causing it all. For me at that time, this is not the only trigger for Hashimoto's or insulin resistance. This was my trigger. So then we find this marker that affects everything. Cortisol is our stress hormone, and it interrupts everything. Oh, I forgot to tell you that my sex hormones had bottomed out. So I had my estrogen and progesterone and testosterone were all flatline. Wasn't producing them. Wasn't ovulating, none of my sex hormones were working. So they put me on a pill, on a contraceptive pill. That was another medication they put me on. So we find out about this cortisol through a holistic doctor. And that means, so your cortisol, it sort of steals from all your other hormones, because it is the most important to the body. Then it sort of gets precedence over everything else, and it will steal from your sex hormones, your estrogen and progesterone and testosterone. It will steal from your thyroid, and it sort of slows everything down. I like to explain to my clients, because this is really important for your gut health as well, is that we have these 2 nervous system states, fight or flight and rest and digest. We've heard of those, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. But when we enter this fight or flight, which I was living in for 3 years, all of the blood flow leaves your digestive tract and goes to your extremities to run or fight the beast. And what that means is none of your organs get nourished. None of it works. Your digestion doesn't work. You don't go to the bathroom properly. You need to be relaxed and in a calm state for all of that to function properly. So none of mine was functioning properly. I'm not absorbing nutrients from my food. My thyroid's not working properly. Pituitary gland is overridden by just producing cortisol. So I just went into this healing phase directed by this holistic practitioner she was a GP, but also an acupuncturist, a nutritionist. So she had a nutrition degree. And that's sort of what gave me all of the facets that I needed to build a healing program for myself, where she told me to stop eating gluten and dairy and sugar because it's just stressing out my digestive system right now and it just needs to relax. She's like, you need to be eating protein every 3 to 4 hours to balance your blood sugar. You need to be eating every 3 to 4 hours, Libby, to balance your blood sugar, which remembering that my insulin was spiking and crashing and we just really needed to reset. She said, no more running. I want you to walk and do yoga. That's it. And I was freaking out because I'm like, I'm gaining all of this weight. She said, you got to trust me. You got to trust the process. Sleep in the morning rather than jumping out of bed and going for a run. Get extra sleep. Everything is about you calming your nervous system. Anything you can do to relax, you need to do. So I went back to Sydney to go into third year of NIDA. And I had this massive mindset reset shift. I started going to a group meditation. I started meditating for the first time. Meditation was just not really a thing back then either. It's not something that we knew about or could turn to. So I used to get a bus to Bondi Junction to do a group meditation on a Sunday afternoon, which I actually really love, particularly if you have trouble meditating. I'm a very busy-minded person. I love that group setting because that collective energy gets you into a much deeper sort of trance. I loved that. I ordered CDs online, back in those days, called HoloSync, which is certain waves like delta waves and things like that to get me back to sleep because I had a lot of trouble sleeping. So I put those on my iPod mini. Now I'm showing my age.
That was really small.
Yes, my iPod mini, I had HoloSync on there to be able to help me sleep. And if I woke up early in the morning, which was every day, I'd put that on and meditate and fall back to sleep. And I did little bits of yin yoga and walked. And everything just normalized. Like those next couple of months, I could feel my energy regulate. I wasn't so tired in the afternoons. I started sleeping a little bit more. I stopped gaining weight. I didn't lose weight, but I stopped gaining it. And everything just started to feel a little bit more normalized in my body. And even my mood changed, which was a big one for me, where I felt incredibly sensitive, constantly emotional, a little bit crazy making in that fluctuating hormonal state, and everything just sort of normalized. And I ended up having a healthy relationship. I had a boyfriend in third year who was really lovely. I sort of caught up with friends and I stopped being quite so reactive to the bullying mentality of the teachers there. Everything just started to be a little bit water off a duck's back. And I was like, oh, here I am again. I'm back to feeling like myself. And then we were able to retest my thyroid antibodies and I had entered remission. So that's actually when I realized as well, which a lot of people don't know, is that Hashimoto's can be managed. Hashimoto's is an autoimmune disease that you can put into remission and not have it anymore. And I went off thyroid hormones, went off the metformin because I no longer had insulin resistance, and I went off the pill because I no longer had, I had PCOS and those hormone problems. Everything normalized. And I was actually in remission for the next 7 years, living like that.
Okay. When you were at your peak, I know you've spoken before about, I'm not sure you've mentioned this today yet, but the fatigue being absolutely overbearing.
Yeah.
In your, I think you mentioned it in year 1 and 2, and the peak of your Hashimoto's.
Yeah.
That fatigue is just like all encompassing. How did that level out as you brought your levels back to normal state?
That was that first time, the fatigue was much more because it was a cortisol driven flare. The fatigue felt much more in that tired but wired sort of state
Yep.
where I feel kind of edgy and irritated and like I've got to get everything done now, absolutely, but I'm tired. And so then it makes you sort of reactive.
Mm.
So it was more like a settling of the nervous
Definitely.
system. That
Yep.
fatigue was much more like, okay, I'm going to succumb to the morning sleep when I wake up and that I'm going to go back to sleep. Or if I feel like napping in the afternoon, I'm going to nap.
Mm.
I've had a different type of fatigue. So 7 years later, um, unbeknownst to me, got a parasite traveling in Mongolia, which makes sense when I look back at it. But I took antibiotics for an ear infection, which you should never do. Antibiotics do not treat ear infections, and I got so sick, and the Hashimoto's came back full, like everything, the weight gain, the hair loss, the fatigue in 2014. But I actually ended up this time with chronic fatigue, which is a very different feeling than what I had at NIDA. This one was like sometimes I would sleep 10 or 12 hours a night and wake up exhausted. And I was a little bit more lethargic in general, where that cortisol driven when I was at NIDA, go, go, go. It was just a very different sensation to 2014 where I couldn't get out of bed and my limbs didn't want to move. I had no energy in my muscles. It was that kind of lethargy. The wind is knocked out of my sails. There's nothing driving me anymore. It wasn't cortisol. It was I've got nothing to give. And in my relationship, in my work, I was just gone.
Mm.
And I had had a very, very big year sort of before it. I'd had a big hit show, like a big box office smash success. And then I toured the country with a show for about 8 months, finishing sort of mid that year. And then I went and I traveled through France for my mum's 60th. And then I got home and I just got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And I was sort of going into a big year in 2015 of a couple of shows. So I was like, I have to sort this out. I can't be on stage feeling like this. I can't possibly do it. So I saw a naturopath in Sydney who I adore to this day. And she's the one who checked my gut. She's the one who did microbiome mapping, which I'd never done before because I was still gluten and dairy free. I was still doing my yoga and walking, and I was still doing the things that had worked before. And this time it wasn't working, and my antibodies were back over 1300, which if anybody's tested their antibodies here will know that's off the charts. Like you can't test higher than that.
It can't. That would rock you. That would rock you thinking you've got this system that's working for you for 6 or 7 years, and you couldn't. You haven't put a foot wrong. You got your stress levels right down. Your cortisol levels down. Everything. You're in this parasympathetic state. You know how to manage, but still, things are going up.
Yeah, that was really, I kind of went, but I'm doing everything right.
Mm.
And it's like, well, that's when there's a different trigger.
Yeah.
And we call it a trigger because there's that wonderful old saying that lifestyle loads the gun, genetics pulls the trigger. Sorry, genetics loads the gun, lifestyle pulls the trigger. Let me correct myself. So my genetics say, yes, you're probably going to get Hashimoto's, but your lifestyle pulls the trigger. And those triggers are varied. They can be viral load, that meaning HPV, meaning herpes simplex, meaning COVID, anything like that can pull the trigger. A lot of people have EBV. Then it can be gut health, parasites, bacterial dysbiosis. There's a bunch of Hashimoto's triggers in the gut as well. It is nearly always leaky gut will be part of this equation, which can come from stress, which can come from environmental toxins. Then, of course, there's chronic stress like I had at NIDA. I've had other triggers include mold. I've had mold in my house after a flood in Brisbane in 2022. We had to move house. So like so many different variations, which I've now learned and I now work on and discover with my clients. But at the time, I didn't know.
Mm.
And I thought I've fixed it. And of course, with Hashimoto's, it's one of those things that it's a journey. And you might put it into remission and then something else might come up. So this time it was a parasite. It was Blastocystis hominis. And I had it was a 3+ in my gut, just meaning it had taken over. And I had a lot of antibiotics as a kid. So your gut health can often, it's very interesting to go down the path of what happened in your childhood when your gut was developing. And I have sort of a very classic, well, I wouldn't say classic, but I have a childhood that indicates all signs, all roads point to really poor gut health. Born in outback Queensland and quite a traumatic birth. And I was pulled out by forceps and because I was a week late and they couldn't get me out and it paralyzed me. They hit a nerve in my temple here. I've got a scar here. They hit a nerve and I was paralyzed on the left side of my face, which was very distressing for my mum and for me, and meant I couldn't sort of suckle properly as well. And then, which is when you get your colostrum and things like that initially as a baby. Then my dad was diagnosed with leukemia when I was 3 months old, and the stress on my mum meant her breast milk dried up and she had to sort of force wean me because she couldn't feed me anymore. And then, of course, I went on like powdered cow's milk, powdered milk from there. I had meningitis at 6 months old and they flooded my body with antibiotics. It's a full IV antibiotics. And then my childhood was very, very stressful because my dad died when I was 2.5. We moved around a lot. And then I had antibiotics every year at boarding school and beyond, which just means my gut health was destroyed. And because we didn't know better back then, we didn't know in the 90s about probiotics and probiotic foods and restoring gut health after antibiotics. And, you know, some of those antibiotics, like for meningitis, were life-saving. But we also know now you go through a process like that, you need to restore the microbiome. We didn't know that then. So my gut personally is rife for parasites or bacterial dysbiosis. And that just meant that there was quite a process to getting rid of the parasite and then rebuilding my microbiome, which is why I'm so fascinated by and passionate about gut health. I love microbiome mapping for my clients because there are so many things that we don't realize are going on until we have a good, clear look at what is under the hood. And I was able to clear the parasite with this very drastic natural process, which I now work on with clients, with this gut healing smoothie and removing all like prebiotic fibers and carbohydrates and anything that will feed the parasite and killing it. And then a microbiome restoration phase. And my Hashimoto's went into remission like that. Once I found it, because I was very sick for about 10 months, found the parasite, I got rid of it. And that chronic fatigue that I had where I couldn't get out of bed, I did the parasite protocol over Christmas and I had to go into rehearsals about the 5th of January that year. And I remember being quite tired when I started rehearsals, but feeling better, clearer in my brain, but needing sort of naps in my breaks and things like that, to about the 2nd or 3rd week of rehearsals, firing on all cylinders and then going on stage for 10 weeks for this show, 8 shows a week for 10 weeks, and having so much energy and my body being back to normal. I just lost the weight instantly. And I was like, this is incredible. I feel amazing. And it just happened as soon as I got rid of that parasite, I got rid of that thing that was constantly triggering my Hashimoto's. I went into remission very quickly.
That's phenomenal. And yeah, it's crazy because you've been so hands-on with it for so long too. Like
Yeah.
you're so deep, your passion and knowledge is so deep, but like you've literally lived it every day,
Yeah.
probably since your teenage years in essence, but lived it every day since you were diagnosed up in Sydney. It's phenomenal stuff, and the way you've done it, like through different iterations as well, like different triggers, which I think is just phenomenal. You've mentioned environmental triggers, and clearly we know, like I think most people know now that stress, whether internal, or external, is worse than anything. You're probably better off smoking 40 darts a day if you're relaxed. But I've said that for a long time, but I do believe it. I don't smoke 40 darts a day, Libs, but I do believe that to be true. As
Yeah.
long as you can chill, you can have. Please don't take that as given to go and smoke 40 darts, listeners. But you know what I mean. But Libby has mentioned two very common triggers for people in this situation, and you've lived it day on day, and you've lived it and now coached tens of thousands to really see the light, I guess, and understand that there's a way. Because I think with this kind of thing, not just Hashimoto's, but any kind of a condition that attacks the healthy cells in our body, I think people sometimes can have a fixed mindset to it, unfortunately, and just think, well, this is my lot in life. This is
Yes.
the way it's got to be forever, which it doesn't have to be forever. Or they'll just listen to that one specialist. Like, imagine you just listen to that one bloke all those years ago.
I know. And just going, there's nothing you can do about it. I've just got to take this medication every
Mm.
day.
And people, mate, you know this for a fact but I think the people that might come across your desk, they're probably enlightened enough to see someone like you and the magic you do. Whereas I think we're probably 90% of the population still would be in that fixed type state where, well, this is it for me. And then that kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in itself, where they'll believe this is it, and that's the way their frequency they'll put out to the world.
And I want to express some empathy for that state as well, because I think that the way my brain works is different. And there's always been a curiosity and a desire to change my state of being. And I don't know what that is about me that does that. But I have clients who I have worked with where I actually understand there is some trauma underlying their illness. And therefore, and this is very real, particularly because I work as a hypnotherapist in trying to help people change their behavior and change their mindset about being sick. For example, in my Heal My Hashies protocol, which helps people get into remission, I actually have a hypnotherapy in there about believing your ability to heal. So I've entered this entire process going, what is causing this? Because if I get to what caused it, then I can get rid of it. Because I've never actually believed that that is my body the way it was always meant to be. I go, I've done this somehow. I've caused this. If I change my diet, I can heal pre-diabetes. If I change my lifestyle, I can heal Hashimoto's. I've never not believed that. And therefore, I can go forwards changing things, knowing that I am on the path to healing, going, I've just got to change that or work on that, and I can get there. But so that works for me in healing. But a lot of people go, let's say they saw their mother sick for most of their lives, then they might have an innate belief that they've got bad genetics or that they're destined to be unwell, or maybe they don't feel worthy, like maybe they don't feel like they deserve to be well. I think there's a lot of mothers out there who are, well, this is my lot in life to be tired. And so I'm actually going to create certain things that make me more tired. I've got this beautiful client at the moment in, she's in the Bahamas. I coach people all over the world, which is one of the great joys of this job. And I met her the other day. She had an appointment like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, my time. And I was like, "What time is it there?" And she goes, "Oh, it's midnight." I'm like, "What are you doing up? Like, I've got other appointments where she can do a better time." She's like, "Oh, no, no, no. I like staying up late and I get done things at night." And I'm like, "What time do you get up in the morning?" "Oh, 6 o'clock in the morning." She's got 3 kids. And I'm just like, "What are you doing? Like, we need to get you to bed." But I can see so many people are driven by certain beliefs in their life about, well, I have young kids and so I have to be tired. And they actually create their world around this. Whereas if you have an innate belief that you deserve to be well, you will create parameters around how to achieve that. And I know that sounds like big talk from a practitioner, but really we have to decide what we prioritize in life. And if you prioritize being well, you will make that happen around your life and your family and your circumstances. And that is where the hypnotherapy does become quite useful. When you said about smoking, people I see who do still smoke, we actually learn in hypnotherapy in our training to understand the why behind smoking. And the why is nearly always time out to myself. And they don't even realize that by having a cigarette, they're inhaling very deeply, they're breathing very deeply, which is calming your nervous system, and you're entering that parasympathetic rest and digest state,
Wow.
which is why your brain clears. Like, it's not just the nicotine and the
Mm.
chemicals, it's the deep breathing and stepping away from work, stepping away from your family. You go outside or wherever and you inhale deeply, you breathe deeply for a few minutes. No
Good.
wonder you feel better.
It's
And
amazing.
so
That's fascinating.
we need to create a different habit that essentially achieves the same thing.
And I guess exactly the same thing can be said for what you were speaking about with the belief system, like the creating different habits. And by all means, like I've got huge empathy for anybody who is in that state right now, because all their evidence would be suggesting that they are stuck in that situation because the way they feel, and we all know how when we feel, some of the levels that Libby's been describing. If anyone feels 50% of that, you're not thinking straight anyway. You got brain fog anyway. You get anxious, and I know there's other mental health elements that come into this kind of stuff. And I love the way you spoke about. I have heard this. I've heard you spoke about gut health and neurotransmitters before, like serotonin release and this kind of stuff. And there's a million things at play with mental health, but the thing that was evident to me was if you are suffering from these kind of things, and my wife also does suffer from this as well, Lib. So I've seen it pretty firsthand, and
Yeah.
the parasympathetic work she's done over the last 10 or 15 years has been very, very beneficial, extremely beneficial. Alternating running for aerobic activity that isn't quite, you can still do intervals but nowhere near as hard, and meditation, clearly she does it for a living, but yin yoga instructing, and sauna, and I know you're going to talk about all this a bit later, but all that kind of stuff's brilliant. But strength training and all this stuff, so it's hugely important, and I'll let you get to that. But I think if people are out there listening thinking they're either your listeners or mine, or thinking about, okay, I'm stuck, we understand that you feel like absolute rubbish. You feel
Yeah.
like you've only got enough battery to just get your kids and put everything into your kids. But there is ways you can do it all and do it much easier. There's an easier way.
Yes. And I think that, every comment I see online or every email I receive, my lens is always they are in the worst time of their life. So I will always come at you with complete empathy, and that you just need to start. That everybody, I feel like, in this state, and the reason I created Heal My Hashies was because when I was coaching people with Hashimoto's, there is too much to do.
Yeah.
And when you try to tackle it like, well, I have to change my diet and change my lifestyle, and like Libby said, I'm a different kind of person. And my capacity for that information, allowed me to sort of do it all at once. But in coaching and becoming a coach, we know what that is, right? Coaching is in guiding a person at the right pace to achieve the greatest outcomes for them. So when I developed Heal My Hashies, because I couldn't help enough people one to one, and a lot of people can't afford that. And I needed to help people over a prolonged period of time because it can take a few months to heal. So then I created this in-out structure where you just put one thing in and take one thing out of your diet, lifestyle, environmental factors, stress, etc. Like just one thing in and one thing out each week, because it takes the overwhelm away. So stop trying to think, this is what I have to do everything all at once, and go, what one thing could I change this week that might shift the needle? So is that, as simple as introducing a probiotic this week? Because then if you just take out all of the stress and pressure of, I've got to lose weight and I've got to get more sleep and I should start meditating, and then you don't do any of it.
Yeah.
So what one thing, is that having 35 grams of protein with my breakfast, and you just focus on that and you make that become a thing that you do without thinking, then we go to the next one. What's the next thing that I could do? Yeah, I've got that. I've got my 35 grams of protein at breakfast. I've kind of nailed that. What about I download that Calm app, or a meditation app, and I just try to do a meditation on a Sunday. See how it's just like, stop trying to do everything and do one thing that works and then keep going.
Totally understand how people, and we do this a lot with stuff we do in 100 Day Heroes and that, like people just get overwhelmed. And that's not even, like you said, they're in the very worst physical stages of their life. And whether they've had two, three, six flare ups, or maybe they've been chronic for a decade or more without knowing it, it's very hard to think, okay, well, yeah, the doctor said this, or Libby said this, or Instagram said this. No, the way you do it is brilliant. I think one in, one out, and then it just becomes so much lighter above the shoulders, the ability just to, once you've done that, well, it's almost you've succeeded that day. Now we can get a couple of things done and that's it. There's nothing else. And I think that's a
There
way,
might,
especially when we know stress causes all this, a lot of it. Like, why add more stress?
and there might be something in visualizing yourself as a healthy person, because when you've been sick for a really long time, it can actually be very hard to unthink that, like to actually, well, who am I if I'm healthy? Who am I if I've got tons of energy
Mm.
and no skin conditions? I think probably the thing that it took me the longest to figure out was the weight loss component, where because my weight gain has seemed to always be correlated with my sickness, with my illness, I've then created this persona, this body, where I go, it's very hard for me to lose weight. I don't, it's very hard for me to do that. And then I'm creating blockages already in my belief systems about how I can impact my own body. That took me the longest time. Everything else I seem to be able to override and go, no, no, I can get better. But the body weight component was really hard. And I think that goes down to core beliefs about my athleticism, because I grew up not very sporty, and I still can't throw a ball. And I think when I started CrossFit, which was because of this film that I was shooting, then I had to work very hard on this mindset around building muscle, about not being bulky, about eating food to sustain my training. And that was where like my entire mindset had to shift around what my body was capable of and how to lose weight, because I'd had a lifetime of restricting and doing cardio, to then actually shift that around and eat more food and lift weights. And I had to really override my internal beliefs and just trust. I had to trust my coach. And then that shifted everything. Then that changed my entire mindset. And now I'm just obsessed with weight training and eating protein and eating more food, that it's really turned everything around in my belief systems and what I'm capable of now.
What you mentioned there, was that your third? Was that this is when you started off this chat and you were in Hollywood, or and you were talking with
Yeah.
your coach? That is what you're referencing there, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, awesome. So that was like another iteration of, yeah, you needed to get in really good shape for this film,
Yeah.
but you hadn't had a flare up per se, but you had to juggle the Hashimoto's, your belief system as far as weight and athleticism and all that. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I was still sort of fasting at the time,
Okay.
which is terrible for your thyroid health. Because the body needs nutrition, and it needs that calm, relaxed state, that parasympathetic state, to be able to create thyroid hormones. But I was still sort of not eating until 1 p.m., and I would nearly die in my CrossFit workouts. Like I would power down about half an hour into it, which is when you sort of start your WOD, and I just couldn't really continue. And then with this nutrition coach, she was like, you need to be eating breakfast, you need to be eating carbohydrates. And I had sort of a fear of carbs and a fear of eating too much. Then I just thought I would gain weight. But gaining muscle is a very different thing to gaining weight. So then I had to change my relationship with the scale, where gaining weight might mean gaining lean muscle, and does not necessarily mean that you are gaining weight in a bad way. And I saw my body just change in 3, 4 months with her. I stayed almost exactly the same weight. And then you started to see muscle appear, and I got leaner. And that's when I started to really understand that facet of my body.
That was a bit of the journey there through COVID and those times. Your knowledge
Yes.
around nutrition. I know you studied pretty heavily just before COVID, so
Yeah.
I guess I know it's hard because we've got a lot. It's a very much a horse for courses thing, but as a generalized view, your view on macronutrients, micronutrients for somebody. I know I don't want you to, you don't have to, I know it's hard to sum up in a sentence, but for somebody who might be suffering through something similar.
So, if you have fatigue, any hormone imbalances, poor digestion, not going to the bathroom regularly, things like that, you really need to look at regular meals and what your macronutrients are. So, I I would say the most common profile of somebody that I get is a woman, 30 to 50, busy, and they skip breakfast, and they're not going to the bathroom, and they're tired and getting mid-afternoon sort of tired spells. Then I go, let's look at your breakfast and what you're getting. We need fiber. So that means we need carbohydrates and complex carbs and protein. Your healthy fats, we just don't seem to have an issue with at the moment. That's my perception. Most people are not cutting too much fat at the moment, but they're cutting carbs and they're cutting breakfast. And we've got to think about, in the morning, our cortisol, our stress hormone, actually wakes us up. Cortisol is not a big, nasty
Mm.
guy. It keeps us alive, but it wakes us up. It's highest first thing in the morning. Our cortisol is actually very aligned with our insulin as well, this blood sugar navigator. So having breakfast within about an hour of waking is incredibly important for our thyroid health, our cortisol and insulin regulation, and for creating the nutrients that we need for these thyroid hormones.
Hmm.
So that is probably where I start with women with fatigue, and see if that improves bowel movements, chewing your food, actually sitting and enjoying your food, not being at the at the kitchen counter, shoveling food, or in the car eating as you're driving to work. Like really creating, and I have options. Like I've created this thing called poop pudding, which is a wonderful high protein. Uh, it's got chia seeds and PHGG and things like that. You can make it the night before. So you've got it in a jar. It will take you 3 minutes to eat it, although I'd rather you ate it slowly. But it's pre-prepared, do you know what I mean, in the fridge, and then help you go to the bathroom and just start your day in a better state for your body to be able to create the energy that it needs.
Well answered, because it is, like, I can imagine that is a very in-depth topic, but like you said 10, 15 minutes ago, one in, one out, let's just focus on this little bit. And that
Yeah.
was a great answer because it gives people a bit of a very good thing to kind of visualize. I was intrigued by the mindset stuff, but with the visualizing a healthy person, and reverse engineering back from there, and that there's so much gold in that. But your last 4 or 5 years, I know you've got a very unique blend of, I guess, or qualifications, talents, and experience. So you're coaching a lot of, well, not just ladies, but human beings online.
Yeah.
That's been fantastic. The hypnotherapy stuff comes into that, no doubt.
Yes.
Yeah, so tell us a bit about what you're doing online the last few years.
So it really came down to I couldn't coach enough. I had, at one stage, I had 55 clients checking in weekly, and I was completely overwhelmed and burnt out. And I thought, with Hashimoto's, that's where I can shift the needle the most. That's where I've got the deepest understanding. And so I created this online protocol that you can follow. You know, you get weekly prompt emails, and it's got a portal, and you go in there, it's got all the information, links to supplements that you might need. It's got yin yoga coaching, it's got everything, hypnotherapy, the whole lot. And that really helps people get a handle on the big picture of Hashimoto's healing. And then if there's a really complex structure underneath, they can come in for one-to-one coaching. In that process, so my partner had this condition called SIBO, small intestine bacterial overgrowth. And it took us a really long time to get him a diagnosis. He was in a lot of pain. I didn't understand what it was. This was pre-COVID, and I'd done my nutrition study, but not gut health study. And we took him to the naturopath in Sydney who diagnosed me. We got the microbiome mapping and found my parasite. I was like, you need to go and see Kato Flynn. She's wonderful. So he went to her, and she discovered that he has this SIBO. And I'm like, why have I never heard of this? I love gut health and all of this sort of thing. I'm like, why have I never heard of this SIBO? So I start doing a bit of research, and I'm helping him do this low FODMAP diet and clearing out this SIBO. And he got much better very quickly. And it was very clear that this worked. And I went, okay, let me look into this. And then I find out that 78% of people with IBS actually have SIBO. So that is a vast majority. And I'm like, well, I think I need to know about this because I deal with a lot of people with IBS as a nutritionist. So I went and did my Master of SIBO with SIBO Doctors Australia out of pure fascination. Loved it. Such good training. I got to work on high histamines and all different gut dysbiosis and candida and the bacterial overgrowth and everything that affects, because it affects a lot of people with Hashimoto's. About 50% of people with Hashimoto's have SIBO. And gut health issues just comes hand in hand with autoimmunity. So I'm doing this study, and about my second last module, lecture and everything, is that it's showing that hypnotherapy has greater outcomes and results for people with SIBO and gut dysbiosis than antibiotics and antimicrobial herbs combined. And I'm reading this, I'm going, hypnotherapy? What? Why have they waited until the second last lecture to tell us about this? So gut-centered hypnotherapy. And there's actually Monash University in Australia they're the leading researchers on SIBO, the FODMAP diet. They've developed an app that helps you with the FODMAP diet in Australia. And they've developed an app called Nerva, which is gut-centered hypnotherapy. So I'm aligned with them, but I'm also, then I went and did my training as a hypnotherapist, and I am a gut-centered hypnotherapist as well, which means I can work one-to-one and do custom hypnotherapies with people. So it is all about calming down this nervous system, this vagal nerve down the front of your body, which impacts your digestion. So it can help you with all of these gut dysbiosis, digestive issues. So then it's like the research and the study and real world experience and what I was experiencing with my clients just led me further and further down this path, where now when I see somebody, I can address the entire system, because I know nutritionally what happens, lifestyle, what happens. But now I can actually address the gut and see what's going on, and then help with this nervous system calming behavioral aspect, which is really important, because people I see are not just people with Hashimoto's, but let's say I get quite a few clients with IBS who are runners, who they might need to run to the loo when they first start running, particularly doing marathons or triathlons, things like that. And what we've discovered is that they can have this sort of nervous system activation, which when you think of fight or flight, the body needs to just get rid of waste really quickly because it's in danger, and it's like, so that you can fight the beast, run. And so it's all about calming down this nervous system. And I've developed this runner's IBS hypnotherapy package as well, to help people with that reactivity, because our brain has neurological pathways that we have these learned patterns where, let's say you get a bit bloated after most meals. What that does is the bloating presses on the vagal nerve and causes a sort of anxiety in the brain. And this gut-brain axis, it's a loop. So chicken or the egg. When you get anxious, you get a bit bloated. When you get bloated, you get a bit anxious. And if food makes you bloat, it can be bacterial dysbiosis, but it can be a learned behavior. So the brain goes, oh, I'm having food, I'll get a bit bloated. As not because of the food, because some people get bloated from water. That's when they're really bad. And they've just got neurological pathways, learned behavior, that food equals bloating, even if it doesn't, which is incredible. And that's where hypnotherapy really is the only solve for that.
Fantastic to work with the subconscious at that level. And I think it's fascinating, learned behavior and obviously habitual stuff that we all don't ever know about. We all have it and we know we can change it. I love your work as one as all system, like, or in physiology, there's 11 systems of the body, and you do it, you take everyone into account. Whereas I think it'd be foolish not to, but I think a lot of people still just look at their area of speciality, whether it is the gut, for example. But you've taken the hypnotherapy and everything else you've done is phenomenal. We've taken the human being in front of you, or the group in front of you, and looking at all the systems into play as one, it's pretty cool stuff. And it's fascinating. I know you love your research, and I know you love learning, and it's pretty cool. You must have, every day it must be so cool to be able to live your gift and help people. How are you physically?
So for my partner, he's like, you're going to study hypnotherapy. What are you doing now? And I'm like, I have to go down this pathway to best help my clients. If there's something that I need to know that's part of the puzzle, I have to know it, because otherwise I can't help my client in the full picture, like in the full spectrum of the way I need to. And so there is a point where I need to stop studying, or do I? I don't know.
Well, you're reciting papers like you used to recite scripts. It's a marvelous thing, but
Yeah,
it's beautiful and it stays in your brain forever, and that's a thing.
yeah, it
How's your
does.
physical well-being at the moment? Everything going well physically for you?
Yeah, actually really good. I've got a head cold today, but
We can't tell. You sound great.
it is the first time I even had a cold for a couple of years, which I often look at, in my body. I sort of take stock and I go, how are you doing? And to not even have a cold for a few years means my immune system is really robust. I did a show earlier this year. I did The Great Gatsby for 2.5 months, and it was excessively physically and emotionally demanding,
Tell
mostly
us a bit about
physically.
that. I think you played Jordan, did you?
Played Jordan Baker, the
No,
golfer.
I haven't seen the movie, so tell me, I haven't seen any of it. So tell me how you went and how was the play?
No, it was wonderful. It was really extraordinary. It was a new adaptation with my favourite theatre companies here in Brisbane, Shake and Stir Theatre Company and Queensland Theatre Company, who I've worked with quite a lot over the years, and so it was a bit of a joy. I'm a bit old to be playing Jordan Baker. To be honest, I
Tell
was
me
the
about
oldest.
Jordan Baker. That's rubbish, by the way. You're at the peak of your powers still. Tell me about what's Jordan's character?
So
Apologies.
she's the professional golfer and a real modern woman in the 1920s. So no
Love it.
husband, no kids, plays golf for a living, which was
Love
very
it.
new at the time for women to play sport professionally. And and she cheats. She actually cheats in the tournaments to win the cup, and um, which it doesn't come into it so much as just her being who she wants to be. She sort of does what she wants when she wants. And in our version of the adaptation, so there is a lead girl, Daisy, who is the love of Gatsby's life. And in our version, Jordan was actually quite protective of Daisy. So she sets Daisy and Gatsby up. Daisy's cheating on her husband, Tom, who's a total asshole and
Yeah, we
has
don't
a
like fuck Tom. We don't like him.
and he's abusive and awful, and I hate him.
Yeah.
My character hates him, and so I'm quite protective of Daisy, and there was a real modern edge to our version where I got to be the epitome of the modern woman, and I was bisexual and a little bit gender fluid and everything else, which was very cool. A very big budget, big show where we had massive moving sets that we moved, and we had dance sequences. I got to dance on top of a gold piano in 4-inch, platform heels.
We're going to need some of these photos in the show notes, I suggest.
So I loved it, but I guess, a bit of a key for me trying to keep my grip on sanity and on my health was, I didn't get sick after the show, which I nearly always do. You're in that state of, again, cortisol and adrenaline constantly, 8 shows a week. And to come down off the back of that and not get sick, I was amazed at my own nervous system health. So I use hypnotherapy. I have it's called Power and Peace, a sleep and stress hypnotherapy package. So I literally just do the hypnotherapy every day
Yeah.
and going to sleep. And, I take care of myself with my food, mostly with my nutrition and backing off on my training and things like that during the show as well.
I love this, and that's the thing. Like, we'll let you get with being an hour or over an hour, but I'd love to talk more about your physical stuff. But I think we could maybe do that in a few weeks or months. But I think you're brilliant the way you described what you do is full on. Like the cortisol is not a bad hormone, guys. It's a great hormone. It gets people to do amazing things. It kept us alive for evolution. And it does. You need it. It's that adaptive stress. It's a good adaptive stress, not
Yeah.
maladaptive. But and what Libby's speaking to there is she can get on stage 8 times a week, over and over again, week after week, perform at the highest level in front of these amazing crowds and do these amazing things, dance, sing, um, have bisexual relationships, whatever it may be, and then to be able to recover,
Yeah.
regenerate, go again, recover, and feel good without getting sick. It's pretty amazing, and that speaks to the system, your system.
Yeah, I feel really, again, and this is important for my mentality and my body, is I feel really impressed and pleased with my body's capacity to be able to do that. Where I think that when I've been sick, I get really hard on myself and I go, why does my body let me down? And why am I such a sensitive snowflake? And why, you know, like I get really frustrated with my body, and then I need to actually often reinforce when my body is doing amazing things and doing what it's supposed to, which it has just done. I'm still in remission. I checked my thyroid antibodies after the show, and I just go, good on you, body. I'm 44, And I've just done that show, with all
Huge.
the young kids. And I'm like,
Mm.
yep, I still got it. I can still do it. If I take care of myself and those foundations at home, where I'm getting my sleep and I'm eating properly, really eating really good food, and I'm in the sauna every day. I have a sauna at home. And I didn't over exercise, like try to maintain my regular schedule while I was rehearsing 40 hours a week, because that's crazy. Do you know what I mean? And if I needed a sleep in rather than getting up to train or something, I listen to that and I go, that's the most important thing. And then
I think
stay well.
the best term I reckon I've heard, and you've used it, used it 5 minutes ago, your nervous system health and the way you manage it and your systems. I guess that, in a nutshell, you do that so well from all different varying systems and environmental factors. And that's fantastic the way you can do that. I'm just trying to do my maths in a week, how you even manage to coach throughout that period of time.
Do you mean the when I was doing the
You,
show?
how did you do any kind of form of work with
It
people
was
when
really
you're acting
hard.
full time?
Yeah, I was coaching on, because we actually rehearse 6 days a week for a show like that. So I would coach on Sundays, which it's a little bit silly, but I have my favorite sort of VIP clients who I continue to coach when I'm doing a show. I don't do them very often. That was the
Yep.
first time in 2 years. Um, and then when I'm doing the shows, we have matinees Wednesdays, Saturdays, and Sundays. So the other days I'm just performing at night. I have to be in there you have an hour and a half physical and vocal warm up before the show, and the show was 2.5 hours. So it's sort of what is that, 4 to 5 hour turnaround for one show. So then I can coach on the days I only have a show in the evening. But it gets a little bit intense. I have my partner runs the company with me, doing a lot of the back end, the email sequences, and well, actually, I write my database emails, but as in setting it up, like he's the
Yes.
tech guy, which he really steps up and does
At that time.
a lot of that, yeah, for me. And I have a coach who works for me, Nora, who's just wonderful. She's a nutritionist, and she did a lot of my emails and things like that that I just didn't have the capacity for. Um,
Your capacity is unbelievably huge, considering. But again, it's the system that you've probably put in place, like your desire and mental. But I think people have to understand that the way you do things is you understand the bigger picture. So every
yeah,
time you're on stage and every time you're doing it, it's all about the bigger picture. You're not trying to just perform for one day. It's about being able to perform for, yeah, you haven't been had a I don't think you've had a relapse for a long time now,
couple of
and it's
years.
because of what. Mm.
Yeah, the last time I had a relapse was after the floods. Our house flooded in Brisbane, when those big floods in 22, and it was very interesting because the water didn't actually come through the house. So we thought we'd escaped being flooded, but the slab, we had a concrete slab underneath our house, and it soaked up the water. So the water came up with the tide, because we backed onto the river, and then the water soaked up into the slab and went up the walls. And it wasn't for about 6, 8 months until the paint started bubbling. And I actually had a friend over. I was helping her with her genetic testing, just going through it with her. She's like, Libby, I can smell mold in here. I'm like, what? And I'd started getting the dermatitis here in my eyes, started gaining weight, started feeling really tired, but I'd launched Heal My Hashies, and I was really working much, much too hard late at night. And I was like, it's just stress. It's stress again, stress. Anyway, then we found the mold, and luckily insurance cleared it out. But my antibodies were at about 330 then. And then as soon as we cleared out the mold, and I did antioxidants like glutathione IVs, and I did the protocol again, and my gut healing and all of that sort of thing. And then my antibodies went back to zero in
That is
about
unbelievable, really.
months. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I have seen now the amount of the different triggers for me. And when I go through a healing process and I see those antibodies go to zero and my
Mm.
symptoms go to zero, and I am so the wonderful thing about that for me is in helping people. I am your pillar of belief.
Mm,
I know what your body's capable of. I know what you can do if you do it. And so you'll never find me wavering in the
mm.
belief of being able to put this disease into remission. And because I've got enough clients now who've gotten into remission, who are just stoked. I had a message a few days ago from a woman who's retested after 6 months because I think she couldn't quite believe she got into remission. And so you sort of hover a little bit. You're a little bit helicopter parent with Hashimoto's where you're like, oh, is it going to come back? And then she's like, my antibodies are still 0 after 6 months. I can't
Wow.
believe it. I might believe it. This is it. This is
Believe
your
it, and you are a shining example, but not just one example. You've done it numerous times from numerous different
yeah.
triggers, if that's the word there. So it's amazing stuff, and I think it's brilliant for people to hear. Now, the listeners are going to have shitloads of questions, so I understand that. But you've got a shining example in someone here in Libby. You can definitely check her out. Instagram, website, and stuff will whack in the show notes. But you give it. Instagram is huge. I know that for you. Anything else that you mainly are present on, Libs?
No, I'm really active on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. They're all just Libby Munro Nutrition. And if
Yep.
you write to me or email me, which is libby@libbymunronutrition.com.au, I'll always get back to you. I really, really work very hard to try to keep my community engaged and be able to respond to your questions. So do reach out if you need me.
I really appreciate your 75 minutes of your time because I know that you're back to back and you got the first cold since 2020-ish. But I appreciate you. What's next, acting wise?
No, I don't have anything unfortunately coming up. I was just on hold. It's the classic, always the bridesmaid, never the bride. I was on hold for a new detective series until last week. So that was a little bit disappointing. I didn't get that part, and I was really looking forward to that. So I would say I'll try to negotiate my way into a show on stage again next year. So keep an eye on Queensland Theatre Company and Shake and Stir in Brisbane.
Shake and
That's
Stir,
what I like.
Queensland Theatre Company, and then I reckon White Lotus season 4 for Libby Munro. She just the main part. You just head that up brilliantly. You could maybe pick the destination too as the main star in 2027 once that comes knocking.
I hear, aren't they filming that already in Far North
Oh,
Queensland or something? I
Libby,
think they
please
were.
don't pretend like I know. I got no idea. Are you kidding? I didn't know. That's an amazing coincidence. I got no idea that they were filming in
Yeah,
Queensland. But there you go. Well, maybe
for
season
sure.
5, they'll understand what they're missing. And you can call it the shots. You don't want to go to North Queensland. You live in Queensland. You can go somewhere far more exotic. In saying that, thanks so much. It's been a privilege. I've learned a truckload, and I love to listen to this stuff. And I understand people like Libby said, one in, one out. You're not going to hear everything and remember it straight away. So it might be the kind of show you listen back to a few times and you look at Libby's content online and just pick up and learn and then reach out with a DM or an email. But I really thank you for your time, Libs. Thank you so much, Libby Munro.
Thank you for having me, Rick.
Absolute best. It's a great day to be alive, and remember, like every day you wake up is a privilege. So we get to do
Yeah.
this, and if you're in a bit of a, I guess, struggle town right now with energy, brain fog, lethargy, or any of those other signs, and you haven't heard about this kind of stuff before, then it might be something to research. But there is always a better way, and it can always be easier. Self-compassion is the key, as Libby said. So continue to try to find what works for you. Thanks so much.